You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security. Because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
Well, we've actually seen some Lancefly activity previously back in 2020, 2021 time. So then when we saw this more recent activity, we were able to kind of combine, I suppose, both those sets of research to produce this blog, because this more recent activity, I suppose, gave us a bit more insight into how Lancefly operates.
That's Brigid O Gorman. She's a senior intelligence analyst at Symantec. The research we're discussing today is titled Lancefly. Group uses custom backdoor to target orgs in government, aviation, and other sectors.
It just seems to be a group that's been around for a few years. The indications are that Merdoor has been around since about 2018. And as I said, we did see it used back in 2020 and 2021, and it's still being used now up in this activity, which continued into the first kind of part of this year.
Well, before we dig into the specifics of Merdoor, what can you tell us about Lancefly themselves? What do we know about them?
Yeah, so as I said, they've been around for a few years by the looks of things. They're an advanced persistent threat group, and we do think they may have, it's possible they have some links to some groups we would know, some previously known groups like well-known names like APT41, our Budworm, which is also APT27, as well as hidden links. And we do kind of discuss some of those potential links in the blog, but all those links were a bit loose, a little bit low confidence. So that led us to kind of break out this activity under this new group name. It seems pretty clear that this group is driven by, intelligence gathering. That's their motivation. As you said, its targets have primarily been in the government, communications, technology sectors, as well as aviation, which is kind of an interesting target as well. And they do seem to be very focused on South and Southeast Asia. That's primarily where their targets have been located. And obviously they're an interesting group then as well, because they do have this custom malware, custom backdoor Merdoor, which we've seen them using. And they're also using the ZXGel rootkit, which is a publicly available tool. The source code for it is publicly available, but it does seem that they have developed that tool to kind of give it some additional functionality and stuff as well. So they are able to, work on their own malware as well.
Well, let's dig into Merdoor itself. What exactly is going on with this tool?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting tool. It's, quite a powerful, it's a fully featured backdoor. As I said, we saw it being used in activity in 2020 and 2021, as well as in this activity. But what's interesting about it as well is, despite the fact we do think it's been around since about 2018, that's kind of when the first sort of indications, seems to be, it's been in development since then probably. But despite the fact it's been around for a good number of years, its use does seem to be very targeted. We've only seen it on a handful of networks and a very small number of machines over the years. So that's interesting. So that's kind of very prudent use of the tool, and perhaps an indicates a desire by Lancefly to kind of keep the tool and its activity under the radar. So the backdoor itself then, its functionality includes kind of, it's fairly typical stuff. It's able to install itself as a service. So obviously that's to try and stay under the radar most likely. It can carry out key logging. It has various methods to allow it to communicate with its command and control server. And it's able to listen on local ports for commands as well from its CNC server. So typically we see it injected into the legitimate processes perfhost.exe or svchost.exe. And it's made up of kind of three components, I suppose. There's a dropper and a loader as well as the backdoor. So the Merdoor dropper, that's a self-extracting RAR file, and that then itself contains three files. A legitimate and signed binary that's vulnerable to DLL search order hijacking, which is a kind of a common technique we see APT groups using. We see the malicious loader, which is the Merdoor loader, as well as an encrypted file that contains the final payload, which is the Merdoor backdoor. So when opened, then the dropper basically extracts these embedded files. It executes a legitimate binary then in order to load the Merdoor loader. It's quite hard to say. And we did also find various variants of the Merdoor dropper that abuse basically older versions of 5 different legitimate applications that are abused for the purposes of DLL side loading, essentially to kind of get this malware onto victim machines.
And how would someone find this on their system, or what techniques are they using to install it?
Yeah, so they seem to use various different infection vectors. So we aren't entirely clear on the initial infection vector in the most recent activity. We have kind of indications of what some of them might have been in a couple of victims. From its earlier campaign that it carried out in 2020, in that campaign it appeared that the group was using phishing emails as the initial infection vector. So then in this more recent activity, we saw some indications in 2 victims that indicate what the initial infection vector may have been. So in one of the government sector victims, there were indications that the initial infection vector may have been SSH brute forcing. And then in another victim, we saw a file path that indicated that a load balancer may have been exploited for access. So that pointed to the fact that the initial infection vector may have been an exposed public-facing server, which is a very common infection vector used by attackers these days too. So it appears that the group, basically has access to or is willing to use various different infection vectors in order to get onto victim machines, essentially.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. One of the things you dig into in the blog post here is some of the details of the ZX Shell rootkit. What should we know about that?
Yeah, so the ZX Shell rootkit, it has been around for a long time. I think it was first reported on by Cisco almost 10 years ago, back in 2014. But the version of the tool, as I said, used by Lancefly is updated. So that's interesting. It indicates that it does continue to be actively developed by Lancefly or potentially by other groups as well. Obviously, we're not sure when that source code is publicly available. And often we do see groups, sharing code and that kind of thing. But someone is certainly developing this tool. But this new version of the rootkit that Lancefly is using does appear to be smaller in size. It also has some additional functions. It also targets additional antivirus software to disable, which is one of the functions of the rootkit, that it disables antivirus software. And I suppose the various functionalities of this rootkit that Lancefly uses include keylogging, providing remote access to victim machines. It's also able to spread laterally to other hosts on the network. And it's there as well, the rootkit, it sort of takes multiple steps to install itself quite stealthily onto victim machines, I would say. The rootkit's loader, it exports functions that can be used to drop payloads that match the host system's architecture. It can read and execute shell code. It can kill processes and other things as well. Also of note was that the rootkit used a the installation and updating utility kind of shared some common code with the Merdoor loader. So that there was some kind of shared code base there that kind of allowed this activity to be, I suppose, connected as well. And we also see its installation functionality supporting things like service creation, hijacking, compressing a copy of its own executable in order, again, to maybe evade detection or to, I suppose, achieve persistence on victim machines as well. So it has multiple functionalities, this rootkit.
And what does this say about the sophistication and I suppose even the persistence, the patience of this threat group?
Yeah, they definitely do seem to be a patient threat group because, I mean, a lot of the groups that we see that have access to custom tools and things like that, we would see them deploying them, I suppose, more regularly, or we'd see them using them in attacks fairly frequently. But it does seem that this threat group, Lancefly, seems to have a very kind of specific focus. It seems to know, I suppose, the victims it's interested in, and it's only really interested in deploying its tools onto those machines, because it definitely is notable that Merdoor especially has been around for as long as it has been, and it's been seen so infrequently, even though, it's a powerful, fully functional backdoor. So you would think when they have access to it, they would use it. But they just seem to have a very specific focus, I think, this group, and I think definitely a desire to stay potentially under the radar and keep this activity kind of low key is one of the things driving this group as well.
Well, based on the information you all have gathered here, what are your recommendations then for folks to best protect themselves?
I think obviously the usual kind of caveats apply when it comes to doing the usual best security practices, I suppose, when it comes to protecting yourself from any of these attack groups. But I think what's interesting with Lancefly as well is it may have those kind of potential links to other attack groups, as I said, like APT41 and Budworm, and also, who else did I say, Hidden Links. So I think that's notable as well for people listening, is those kind of connections between all those different Chinese APT groups, that there can be a lot of sharing of personnel, there can be a lot of sharing of, tools as well. Like we did see with the ZXtra rootkit that Lancefly used was signed by a certificate with the name We Made Entertainment Co Limited, and that was previously reported as being associated with APT41. But that doesn't really conclusively say that those groups are necessarily connected, because we do know that these kind of Chinese attack groups can share those kind of things amongst each other. And as I said, kind of shared personnel and that sort of thing. So I think one of the things to keep in mind with this Lancefly activity is, while we've broken out Lancefly here as a new group, because as I said, those kind of links we saw with the other kind of attack groups weren't definitive, it's certainly possible that Lancefly could be cooperating with other APT groups and kind of working alongside them. And, potentially that can lead to tool sharing, as we've seen with other tools in the past, such as, say, PlugX and ShadowPad, which Lancefly does also use in this activity, but they're shared tools now amongst other different attack groups. So I think it's just important to keep on top of all these groups' activity, on top of the new tools that they're using, like Merdoor, like this developed ZXtra rootkit, and just to watch out for any of the indicators on your system and make sure that there's an awareness that these attack groups are, I suppose, constantly working and developing tools and trying to take new steps to keep their activity under the radar all the time.
Our thanks to Brigid O Gorman from Symantec for joining us. The research is titled Lancefly. Group uses custom backdoor to target orgs in government, aviation, and other sectors. We'll have a link in the show notes. Expel knows security isn't a checkbox. It should empower your business to minimize risk, identify and address threats, and grow. What's Expel's secret? It's technology and people working together to make security easy to understand, use, and continuously improve. Powered by their security operations platform, Expel offers managed detection and response, vulnerability prioritization, phishing, and threat hunting. It's security that makes sense. Learn more about Expel, hear what customers say about the visibility and fast outcomes they get, or request a free trial at expel.com/cyberwire. The CyberWire Research Saturday podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Elliot Peltzman, our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. Hello, listeners. We're always looking for ways to improve the CyberWire network to give you an intelligence-driven news experience that saves you time and keeps you in the know on the latest developments in cybersecurity. We'd like to hear your feedback in our 2023 audience survey. Complete this survey for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Visit thecyberwire.com/survey. That's thecyberwire.com/survey and share your feedback. Thanks.